It's just breaking down that out of a global market of, I believe it's over close to $500 billion, much of that is in the US. Africa is actually being segmented together with the Middle East, but the question is, where is our space? And as women, where are our opportunities? So this is a slide that I received from someone who was supposed to be on the panel today, but she couldn't make it, she's unwell. That's Njeri Maina. And this is a summary that was part of a report by Space in Africa, whereby you'll see that maybe some of you who might have assumed, like me, that because we are very many in Earth observations, then that would be the significant segment of the space industry. Turns out, we are not. So you'll see from the big blue section, that's GNSS and similar services. Then we have satellite TV as the next big segment. And I hope as I'm mentioning these segments, you're starting to think, if you're already in the industry, where do you want to gravitate towards? If you're just starting your journey, where do you want to begin? This is basically the different pieces of the pie, which can define what kind of course you want to do, how do you want to advance your career, basically where is support going towards. So I'll have 4 key messages that I'd like to communicate before I invite the panelists here. I'll start with the one obvious one, which everyone has been making before me. We already are making use of space technologies, and they're solving problems in Africa. But what we need to do is we need to scale impact. And this is driven by many initiatives within Africa at the moment. So we have our strategy as the Africa Space Agency strategy. We have the Group on Earth Observations post-2025 strategy. All of them are saying, let's move from this, us, interacting here, and let's take it outside and drive last mile use. The next point I'd like to make is startups are our engine for space innovation. And I really loved the opening remarks we got from UNOSA, whereby we are seeing that startups are coming in strongly, especially from Africa. It was great hearing that from Strathmore University. We had one of the leading startup groups participating globally and excelling in that. So we have a lot of that in this room. And maybe what I'd urge for many of us here as professionals, as founders, as leaders in this industry, what we need to do is make sure that the talent pool has access to data and the cloud, which I'll be inviting our panelist, Anna from Konza, to talk about what they're currently doing for Kenya for us to access this. We need to provide training, mentorship, standards guidance, and use case clarity. I have supported a lot of hackathons and a lot of challenges we have in Africa when it comes to innovation. And most of the time, what someone frames in their mind, it's fantastic, but having it implemented becomes a challenge because we don't have a real world use case for it. The public sector needs to be the first customer, and they therefore should drive this harder than every other sector that is there. We need to support evolution of hackathons to prototypes, and finally, investment-ready solutions. And we need to provide room for women in this. And it's not just telling them we are, like whenever they put the announcement that we encourage women to apply, that's not enough. Let's make room for women. Women are not just beneficiaries of the space ecosystem. And I'll just go to some of the statistics that were mentioned from UNOSA, and I also derived these from UNOSA. We also have from AfriGeo, we have from NASA, and also Digital Earth Africa was able to compute some of these. And you can see from the numbers I've highlighted, 3%, 7%, 30%, 20%. Our gap is still there. There's still so much room for women, which I'm hoping that our panelists will be able to shed more light on what they are doing as individuals and what they are doing within their organizations. So, as women, we want more space as founders, engineers, researchers, policymakers, community leaders, not as data entry people. We want more inclusion. We want pathways created for us in programs, mentorship, paid internships, and leadership tracks. And also we want increased visibility, which, let me mention as a side note, it's not easy to find women to come and sit on panels, and I'd like to thank one of our panelists who agreed immediately when we asked her to actually come in and make contributions. So we hope that there'll be more support for women to feel bold enough and strong enough to come and share their insights. And my final remark is collaboration is our biggest advantage. We can leverage partnerships, collaborations, training at all levels, provide initiatives that are sustainable, provide investment incentives, a bit of tax relief here and there, research and development, PhD, and so on, and also ecosystem development, which has been great to see with the Space Agency and the recent launch of the communities of practice. And obviously to Stella and Charlene for creating this community as an ecosystem where we can come and share. So with that, I'd like to invite the panelists to come and share real thoughts. For me, these are just ideas that I have, but I think we have the real industry people who can come and say what's really going on. So I invite the first panelist. This is architect Anna Musimi, who is a leader in the architectural and construction sector, and she has been pioneering initiatives in strengthening Kenya's unmanned aircraft systems ecosystem by providing a safe and secure environment for drone development. And in addition to that, you can see there are so many things that, and I wish you could fit everything that you can do into this slide, but yeah. So please join me in welcoming Anna. Our second panelist is Mr. Charles Mwangi from Kenya Space Agency. It's very clear that the room is full of people who are very familiar with Charles. He's an expert in space technology, and he has represented Kenya in various forums at international level, regional level, and so on. Welcome, Charles. Our next panelist is someone who surprisingly did not sit down when we were asked, sit down if you like your job. So Eric has many roles that he plays in our industry, and he's been pioneering a lot of that for many years. He's the president of ISK, but also has the role of chair of lands and planning sector, physical planning sector at KEPSA, and chair of the technical working group for geospatial standards. Welcome, Eric. And our final panelist is Karen Kimunga. That should be Kenya Airways, my apologies, who's a fleet analyst at Kenya Airways. She's an aeronautical engineer by training and has a strong foundation in technical records, maintenance, quality and safety management, and so on. Something else about Karen is that she's very passionate about equity, safety, and purposeful advocacy, and has been a major champion of cross-department collaboration, advancement of women, and skills development through various forums. Thank you, Karen. So I just want to confirm that everyone has a mic, hopefully. And I think we can start off with Anna and Charles, who coincidentally are just sitting here next to me. And the first question is the graphic that had shown there on Africa, the space industry valuation, that it's a whole $22.64 billion. So my question to you is, what exactly does this mean to either of you, or actually to both of you? What does this mean, and what are your organizations doing to make sure that we unlock that potential? You can start with Anna, please.
Thank you. As she has introduced herself, at Concert Technopolis, and we have done the first new visual line of sight registration from Creative Aviation Authority at Concert Technopolis. And of course, the figures she's talking about are correct. More than billions are out there in the space economy. I would like to speak around drones, because that is my specialization and also what we are doing at the Technopolis. And currently, the market available for drone technologies in Kenya is at $1.6 million only. Please note, the research shows that China currently is at $1.6 billion US. Okay? I don't know what that difference is, VT, 1,000% difference. But projections are that probably by 2029, 2030, remember the Technopolis Vision 2030 project, we'll be able now to get around the $2.23 million investment in the drones. However, by that time, the rest of the countries will be far much higher. So the potential available there from our youth to the level who have already finished school and at work are different potentials within the space. Of course, we start with capabilities of manufacturing, for instance, because if you look at statistics, even at Kenya Civil Aviation Authority and Kenya Space Agency, you find that there are lots of interest coming from the globe for Africa. And I think Kenya in particular plays a pivotal role as an entry point of global companies in space to access Africa. Of course, people doing engineering in space, you know about the wings and all the technologies around operations in aviation. Kenya or Africa is a unique situation. So, for instance, to manufacture drones, which we have areas for manufacturing in Konza, you need the manufacturers to come and do it from here, so that they can test the elements on wings, wing strength, attitudes, and the different spatial elements presented in Africa. And that is how they will be able to enter Africa. In Konza, we're looking at, we've also launched the first unmanned traffic management system, which is locally for the individuals at Konza. And really, we actually found we have tools happening in Europe and US. Asia is developing that. So the innovators in engineering around space and aviation, we actually have a chance to come up with software and applications to support space. Okay? And the organization are showing that in very near future, 2 to 3 years to come, those people, the people with software and applications that can be used in space at drone level will be having a potential of up to $250 million. Okay? And that gives a chance even to our startups to come in and have a unmanned traffic management system. Unmanned is at the drone level, not is the aviation upper level where there's a lot of software and applications happening there. We've worked also in collaboration with the School of Flying, and for instance, on Monday we launched Master of Science in Aviation Management for pilots, because we know pilot entry points and education going up there is usually different. But with Kenya School of Flying, now Bachelor of Science in Aviation Management is being offered. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of money, as you have said, available, but it all depends on how we position ourselves. Things to do with lands, cartographic surveys, health, matters environment and conservation are big. So there's a lot of opportunity. It all depends on how you position yourself and which line you're interested in. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Charles?
Thank you for me. Again, my name is Charles from the King's Messages, and again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Stella and Shane for having concluded this very important conversation that allows us to engage and see the role of women and their contribution to the sector. But the question in terms of, you asked about the African space economy. But again, if we take a step back and look at the global space sector, it is projected to be about 500 billion USD. And the African Union is about 22 between 20 and 25 million dollars. When you look at that perspective, that's about less than 5% of the global economy. For the whole of Africa within the space sector. The 22 you're talking about is for the whole of Africa. So even the proportion that Kenya, given that Kenya is not currently, we are amongst the top 5, but not the top 2 or 3 countries, and we're hoping to get there. So the question again, and again, when we looked at the metrics in terms of the sectors, we talked about remote sensing not being one of the highest in terms of the returns on investment or what has been invested to the sector. But the question that then begs is, again, trying to focus on what is our needs as a society. And again, at the Kenya Space Agency, we have a strategic plan, one of which identified, I just mentioned 4 of the main items. So we focus on coordination and regulation. So coordinating and having forums and even supporting the activities that we're having today, so that now people become more aware of the opportunities that are available and also allowing us to engage to understand. Then, of course, the other element we're looking at is building national capability that then would allow maybe for having data centers that would then allow those who want to develop or those who want to innovate to have spaces where they can then be able to innovate. The other one is on driving on the utility or the utilization of space data for different activities, for organization support or for developing services. And that is where I read one of the slides where you're talking about the public sector. But I think sometimes we get it wrong when we say that the public sector has to adopt or has to clear the market. But you also have to understand that we have to also help those who are in the private sector to help those who are in the public sector to understand the value proposition. Because the assumption is that the public sector already understands. And even in our engagement with them, we also see there is room for those who are developing solutions to engage with the public sector and then help demonstrate the utility. Because again, the has indicated where most of the solutions of the pilot projects are coming from outside. Can we try and develop that from within? And that is a challenge that we also extend. And then, of course, there is the element about research and innovation, and development, which we're also supporting to try and see how then best to be equipped or engage our community yourselves to see whether we're able to derive value. So it might not be right to say that we have to cover a niche. It is as fast to us as the only way we're going to cover a niche or to try and create more opportunities is fast owning our problems. Because I think from Africa we find that to be a challenge and also in Kenya, where we are not very clear what our problems are. Because when we innovate based on the problems, then you have a user community that is waiting to adopt your solutions. And if you can go that way, then you will unlock the world.
I'm glad you said that. My follow-up question to that is, what do you think should be our national priorities that we can align? You said that there are 4 areas at the agency, that those are the roles that you use to come in and help the sector. So I'm just wondering, what are the national priorities, those problems that we need to address Yeah, so that you come out here with actionable insights, things that you can go and do and tap into the $250 million that's waiting for us.
Maybe I should ask the audience because they are not who knows the problem, because I don't want to create the problems for them. So what do you think is a major problem? I wish you had Mete or that platform where we would be able to pick that. But I will pick one or maybe two. One is agriculture. Well, how do we put food on the table? How do we ensure that food is available where it is needed when it is produced? And if we can innovate around that, then there are different additional value that we'll be able to add. If I look at the value chain for agriculture, for example, there is a policy making, there is also the farmer police information. And again, you have been in the center about how we can potentially be able to use space technology for mapping where the crops are. Why is that important? Because once we know where the crops are, then and their potential in terms of yields, then we know where to locate their agro-processing centers. We'll also be able to know where you have surplus, where you have deficits for decision support. So meaning that if you're producing a lot of waste in Tanzania, and then there is Marsabit that doesn't have food, then how do we anticipate that and then make that food available? And also where we have a deficit, then be able to create the important good time. And then more importantly is, for us is, besides the policy level, is how then do we impact the farmer? And that could be, once we know what crops they are growing, then we can get to the level where we're able to give them advice, because we can get space data on weather and then make that available. We can get data on soil moisture, which can be made available. And of course, that then will help along the value chain for other places. And then now working together, we mentioned about the communities of practice. One of the roles of the communities of practice is essentially a gathering where you have the market area conversations that brings together every near public sector, private sector, academia, even the people who are innovating. So that then we're able to have a conversation in terms of what is it that is required. How can we then innovate around that, and then who would be the off-takers for that? And then, of course, engage the development partners and see the funding where it could come from, and even from government, see what we can be able to put on the table. So, just using agriculture, but we could look at the health, which is again one of the bottom-up topics. There is also human settlement, which is again we also looking at. That MSMEs is also one of the other areas where we're trying to see how can we support them to become more competitive. And then we also have the digital economy.
Thank you so much, Charles. Eric, as you heard from Charles, it seems that he doesn't want to take the full responsibility as public sector to drive this, and he's saying, let's create space for the private sector. So, as a leader in the private sector in various capacities, I would just like to know, based on those potentials we've mentioned, we have an untapped space economy. What do you think are the major bottlenecks, which, I know you are sat in between the government of Kenya in different capacities, but what do you think are the major bottlenecks that might hinder us here in Kenya from realizing this potential? And who in the room do you think can address something immediately? So just to give a sense of who is in the room, for the participants here, we have some from government, we have some from the judicial system, we have advocates in the room, and I think that's mainly it. So who do you think in the room, or which role do you think can provide an immediate solution to this bottleneck?
Yeah, thanks for. So first, let me join Charles and the rest of my colleagues in congratulating Charlene and Asnona for the putting up this event together. And I'd like to assure you, on behalf of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, who will continue to support and look forward to working with you for future events. The question that Pauline is asking, in terms of bottlenecks, I would not really say that they are bottleneck as such. What I would say is that we are faced with a technology that is still growing. And I would say it's still growing, although it is not new, because we've been having Earth observation, space technology, starting all the way from the late 60s up to now. So that's a number of years which have gone into this technology. But we are beginning to have more acceptance of the technology. We are seeing a lot more industries or institutions coming up and making use of the technology. And on the data space, we can be able to see that we have a lot more data that is free. That means that the experts in the field can be able to have access to that data and make meaningful applications out of that. I would say that there's also more institutions we have seen in the recent past, of course, the formulation of the Kenya Space Agency to try and coordinate those particular affairs related to space. So there is definitely more investment coming in from the government with the notion of being able to deploy our own Earth observation satellites to be able to generate data that then we can be able to consume. We're also seeing more training, more education, and we can also see such kind of events that we're having here Women in Space. I wish you could also have men in space. Thinking about that. But I think the bottleneck would only be on the fact that maybe people are not seeing it as a critical technology. Like internet. If you switch off internet now in this room, there'll be chaos. If you turn off social media in Kenya today, there'll be a lot of noise. If you turn off electricity, there may be some noise, but some people will still be able to live with it. So we need to make the technology to be mission critical, and we need to be able to produce results from the applications that we're deploying, so that the government, the private sector can be able to appreciate more of this technology.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I really love the example you've given on social media, which would make me want to check with the room the aspect of demystifying what actually falls within the space industry. How many people think that social media falls within the space industry? Don't be shy. And just tying back to the question that May had earlier about how many people, I think the question was if someone has used satellite data today. I think many of you had said once, how many people think here that you've used it at least 5 times this morning? Thank you, my overachievers, I love this. So, the interesting bit about the space economy is that social media, internet, all of these actually rely on space technology. And I'd like for us to try and demystify a bit of that. Because I think when we look at the application of this, we're looking at it from a technical aspect, and I can say honestly for me, coming from Earth observations, most of my thinking is filtered towards that. But the question is, what about the other sectors of the space economy? So to help with that, I will ask my question to Karen. So from the aviation industry, I think on many other sides we have a lot of data being collected and being organized and being made available for different purposes. like the examples that Charles was giving on agriculture and relying on satellite data for agriculture. So I'm wondering, for aviation, what kind of data do you have access to that can inform the work that you're doing? And what would you imagine are the technology gaps that would hinder you from accessing and making use aspects of this data from Kenya? I'll give an example on this. Most people, when they open their weather apps, you will go to MSN Weather, you will go to other sources. But I don't know how many people go to the Kenya Met website and check from them what is the weather situation. So I'd just like to know from you, from aviation, which kinds of data are you using, and are there any technology gaps that will limit you from using the ones that are in Kenya?
Thank you so much. First of all, I think it's for everyone I said, thank you for organizing. This is a very wonderful platform. Some of us get to have this when we were young as kids. We love to see that we are opening up these conversations to more generations that are coming after us, and that is, in essence, the only way that we can really progress forward, and it's the stance as we are able to do today. So, on to your question, let me start with the most basic one. When you're flying from point A to point B, we use a lot of data and basically on money. And this money is not just for the research and development, it's for the trainings as well. We have to export a lot of talent outside for them to be trained, because we don't have the capacity to do that in-house. We do not just within Kenya, but within Africa. We depend a lot on what we call the first world countries, which is a country we don't like. But we depend a lot on them for some of these things, and unless we are able to bridge that gap, we will still continue depending on data that is collected by foreign bodies, because, again, because of the fact that there is these technology gaps, it's very, let me use this term very loosely, it's very hard for people to trust the data that we have from the internet. For example, let me give a very simple example. I think there was a couple of years back where guys had been told there's going to be arrested for a couple of weeks. However, in the middle of that predicted dry spell, it rained really heavily. It flooded. I didn't actually last year, between April and May. It rained so bad, it flooded in so many places. And the question most people were asking is, we were told by our medical department that it won't rain, yet it rained and it flooded. So things like those are, not that it was wrong information, but because these things keep changing and we are not at the place where we can get as much information as countries that have millions or hundreds of satellites out there, there's still a lot of distrust issues for lack of a better word in what is there right now.
I think there was a collective gasp in the room, silently in our hearts, when she said, yeah, we use data, but not from here. So, Charles, I'd like to know, as we are demystifying all of this, there are things that Karen has said, like, oh, you know, we need to send people outside to go and learn. We need to financially invest significantly to do this. So I'd like to know, we, not me, it's us guys, we would like to know from the perspective of the space agency And if you have specific examples on women, how some of those things you're already addressing. It could be directly through the 4 areas you mentioned, it could be through partnerships that you have. How are some of the ways that the agency is addressing some of those gaps identified?
Thank you for the question, and again, so in terms of capacity building, because again, like indicated, when I talk about national ability, we look at 2 dimensions. We look at the infrastructure, of course, the element of data, and of course, the people and how we make the process. So part of our engagement has been, and again, the DG had mentioned that during his opening remarks, in terms of the proportion of women that we have within the agency. We have quite a good representation. I would say, I don't have the actual number, but we equally much in terms of the male and the male and female representation at the agency. And then what we've done is, when opportunities arise, then we give representation. We ensure that the ladies and the gentlemen are well represented in those compositions. In terms of the issue that was mentioned about data, we have to get to the level where we accept where we are and what we need to do. And one of the things that we have always had was accessibility of data. Sometimes they don't talk about availability because data is available. If you go to the different institutions, they collect data all the time. But what we can't be able to do is put up infrastructure that then makes that data accessible. And of course, now accessible at different levels. Because again, data is usually very sensitive because we're dealing with, it could be personal information. Then how do you anonymize it? And that is the conversation we're getting into how do we create safe spaces where institutions can collect information and then make them available in a machine-driven form. Because I think that is a major issue. Because once we start having that, then the other element will be now also engaging the academy. Because when you give them the data, then of course we make that easy for them to be able to curate solutions or to do research using our data. And then of course now, if that data becomes available, and that is again the composition that we're saying we have in one of the initiatives that we've been trying again, we work with the level when you're developing what we're calling the Kenya Hub, the Kenya Data Hub, where we're trying to aggregate the data sets that are available for Kenya, that then will make that data to be more accessible, so that now if you're a Kenyan and you're looking for data that is of spatial data, and then it is if you have it available, then it makes it, you process it much easier. Then of course, to be our role to ensure that now different other agencies, we talked about the Kenya Meteorological Department and other organizations to make that data available. In terms of capacity building from outside, again, the first one have also gone ahead of us in terms of the development. And even lessons that we hear from China, from Korea, is that they were strategic enough to send their people to go study in the West, and then come back with an intention of them building capacity. And that is potentially also what we need to leverage on. Fortunately, with the advent of the internet and the open courses and all that, that gap is becoming much less of a problem as it used to be traditionally. So the question still goes back to the point that I mentioned earlier. We need to own the problem. If we own the problem, then it becomes easier to collect the data that will then address the problem, and then start creating solutions for the problem. And it is only then that then even our stuff becomes meaningful and even scalable, because they are addressing a problem that is locally nature. And that potentially has it. And even later can be made into a product, commercial-based product. Because if you're collecting information that is helpful for my research, And there are pathways or there are opportunities where I'm able to see that when it is paid. Because I don't think paying has been the problem. It is an issue around having the infrastructure that will allow us to be able to access that.
Thank you. I like what you said, that it's about access and not availability because it's already there. Just a quick insight from Eric on standards and interoperability. Is there something that stands out immediately which you feel maybe is still neglected, it's still something you've not figured out to enhance access to this data that Charles has mentioned is available? And what would you recommend as an area of research? Because we also have people here who are in their undergrad, postgrad, like what is an area of standards and interoperability to enhance access that they would look into with the specific context of Kenya?
Yeah, thanks. So luckily, with organizations such as Open Discussion Consortium, and putting together the software companies and the hardware companies that work in this space, there is a general agreement in terms of building solutions or software or applications that are open and that can be able to connect to one another. So that has helped quite significantly. If you go back to the late 90s or early 2000s, in the years it was a difficult thing because you could only work within a certain environment if you're using a specific software. That is more or less an issue that is not so prevalent at the moment. But locally, we have had attempts to, for example, develop the spatial data infrastructure that will allow for different institutions or organizations that are involved in creating data to have a platform through which that data can be discovered, shared, and so on and so forth. And it's a conversation that has been going on for long without any logical conclusion. But I know we have made attempts to resolve some of this by coming up with draft legislation within the survey bill, the proposed survey bill, that is including the aspects of spatial data infrastructure and giving the strength to the organizations to be able to share that data. We're also setting up the National Spatial Data Infrastructure Committee that will be made up of different stakeholders to allow them to have that opportunity to share the data.
Thank you. So I have a few more questions, and I'll direct these to Anna and Karen. So Anna, I'll start with you. So we have parametric insurance, which is the growing area of application of satellite data. And it's a growing segment that we have with the space industry, whereby now insurance companies or brokers are exploring how do you rely on satellite data or Earth observations. Basically, any information you can stream from the satellite, how can you rely on this to properly insure some of the businesses we have locally? So I know in the room we have, I'm not seeing her, but I know there's someone here from the drone sector. And I was just wondering, now looking at parametric insurance and relying on insights from satellite data to compute compensation, and we're starting from, like the founder we have from drones, to other contributors in the space economy like agriculture, where you'll see in the agricultural value chain, it's significantly powered by women. So I'm just wondering from your perspective, what do you have in place with the space, with Konza in terms of preparing us to make use of this data to apply it in parametric insurance to make sure that people are secure in the event of any disaster or any natural phenomena. And again, because we also have people who are looking into going into the drone industry, I'm just wondering, with the intersection of parametric insurance, drone sector, what do you think are some of the ways that they can start applying some of the knowledge skills, some of the work that they're doing to tap into this? I really liked this $250 million thing you mentioned. So how do we get into this money, basically?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You've brought in a very good conversation around insurance. We go to parametric insurances. It's for sure. Insurance in the space is actually a new phenomenon, and insurance companies are finding it hard to create policies around space. But what you first about data, that could be used by the insurances. For CONSA, government has actually developed a concept at the Kenya National Data Center, which has big space, and it also has the redundancy provision more than 2 kilometers away. And this is providing space for government information to be stored in there. With our visual line of sight operations at CONSA, then we provide a link with data developed from space and storage in CONSA National Data Center. So I want to say that we have a one-stop solution. And this data, depending on what the insurances would want, then it becomes very easy for it to be shared out, and whatever policies are being taken around them, that can be used. Of course, use of space for health is very big. Now, I know currently it's active in an area in Kisumu, with some companies from Europe doing last mile delivery for medicine and things like that. But as CONSA, we have a one-stop shop available, or solutions for data collection, data storage, and data dissemination, which can be used by insurances, by the players in, and everybody who is open. Actually, just to talk about it, the availability of the cloud space has been done up to smallest level of MBs, 2 terabytes. It's like you pay as tokens to our data center. You pay token as you use, and that makes it affordable to everybody. Now, you're talking about how people in Africa can tap into the available dollars, especially in the unmanned section. It is very open at CONSA Technopolis because we are an innovation center. I don't want to say we are that wrong, but at CONSA is where you are allowed to make a mistake and learn from it. We've also opened an ecosystem where global partners come in and merge with local partners. We actually have partnerships around air mobility. We are looking for probably next year to look how Kenya can go commercial with air mobility. The patients are showing that 1 minute flight with a drone saves around 175 to 300 euros. And we think this is something we can sell it out there. So for young people, that will be done controlled remotely, for instance. So those chances are already there, and to welcome all interests to be, you can say, to CONSA Technopolis and be able then to match the global opportunities available for those who are bringing foreign direct investments in Kenya, and now the collaborators from whatever level in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And as you all very well know, there are still so many other questions that were there with specific areas for women. But we're going to close the panel with a quick question to everyone. So, how many here are looking to be mentored? I love this. So, for each panelist here, if we wanted to be mentored by you, how do we get in touch with you to receive mentorship? Personally. We'll start with Karen.
Really sorry. Well, the easiest way to get away of that and respond is through email. Very horrible with WhatsApp messages. I'm not a fan of phone calls.
What would be the
emails? I respond to emails as soon as they come. So email is the quickest and most reliable way to get on.
What would be the format of mentorship you would be providing?
I like thinking about mentorship from a broader perspective and not just relying with what I am doing, because there's a lot more to mentorship than just becoming an aviator or becoming an engineer. It's helping you build life skills, helping you build the right networks and connections, because the people I interact with are not just engineers. There's a lot of lawyers, a lot of pilots, a lot of doctors, a lot of entrepreneurs as well, people in SMEs. So you need to know what you want to do, not necessarily career-wise, but because I don't personally don't believe in this in mentorship for career, I believe in mentorship for purpose. So what is it that you purpose to do? What impact do you want to make? And then from there, it's easier for us to work together. It's not me telling you do A, B, C, D. I'm not giving you a checklist or step-by-step process, but we're working together to see what do you need to build skill-wise, whether it's hard skills or soft skills. What connections do you need to make, and what steps do you need to take in the right direction, and then come up with a system of doing quarterly or monthly checkups just to ensure that the milestones that you have set for yourself, you are meeting them. So purpose-led mentorship, not career-led mentorship for me.
Thank you so much, Karen. I would invite Eric to speak on mentorship for women. How do we get in touch with you to be mentored? And what's the format of mentorship you provide?
Good question.
FYI, he's the most elusive. I would like to say I was mentored by Eric, but I would need to find him first to mentor me.
Yeah, you have been looking for me for 3 years. Email is good, just like she has dedicated, but yeah, I mean, your question is very difficult. I don't know what to say. Yeah. I'm here, you can get my contacts.
So during tea break, let's connect with Eric. Everybody. Charles.
Yeah, okay.
Charles, please.
So I would say I tend to be active on LinkedIn and Martin, so maybe can reach on that. I would say mentorship is also, given again, we are also not too many, or I might say not too many. What we've done as an agency is we also created opportunities from our colleagues to be able to share that. That's how we have a goal out there. So if someone wants or has interest in particular areas, then they can reach out to any of the specific colleagues besides myself. And then if you reach out and say you are particularly within the space sector, whether it is the upstream or the downstream, we should be able to support. Again, also it depends on where you are at. So mentorship doesn't have to be a formal engagement. It could be bumping into each other outside the place. You say when you're having tea or having coffee, and then you could ask a question where you which is of interest, or it could be a formalized, and it is from those conversations, because there has to be interest from both the person who's being mentored and the person who's doing the mentoring. So you have to agree on what support system or what they potentially require. But again, we are available to support, and that is why we are also available in this conversation.
And yes, I'd like to give credit to KSA for a lot of support you're providing to young professionals and especially women in the industry.
I saw the young gentleman there. We even have a space club, which is essentially supposed to be a mentorship program.
Yeah.
And we visit quite a lot of schools, even with some of the private sector companies that are engaged here. So that is essentially our role, and we're happy to support.
Thanks. And finally, Anna.
Thank you. I'm going to come from a number. I'm actually in Monza, so you can always stop. And for me, it should either be academic life, balance, work-life balance is probably research-life balance. I would also welcome the women to join Silicon Savannah Woman. We have that at Further Technopolis, and today it does different segments, including STEM, where they will mentor one another and grow in STEM. Is fact, please come to our stands for all the Technopolis out there to learn more about Further Technopolis. And the very last, welcome you to invest at Further Technopolis. Thank you.
Let's talk about that $250 million. So with that, I hope that you've learned from the panelists on opportunities we have in Africa, opportunities we have for women, and how the organizations are supporting growth of our industry and tapping into that potential. With that, thank you, Kevin, Eric, Charles, and Anna, and I'd like to hand it over back to the program directors. Please let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much for integrating that very informative, powerful session, for giving us the right answers and prompting the speakers to give us where to get the resources, how to get them, and where the money is. So, hope you've gotten that. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome, please stay on stage. I'd like to welcome Shani and Stella for a quick token of appreciation to our speakers. And then to do that, I want to officially also recognize the partners that are on stage. So we have Further Technopolis, Kenya Space Agency, International Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, and Oka Services, and last but not least, Kenya Airways. Sorry about that, and Kenya Airways. These are all of us, the partners on stage, and the partners that are based in insight. And the next one is our capital development. That's Karen, Kenya Airways. Please a round of applause for Kenya Airways. And also Oka Services. Charles, Mr. Charles from the Kenya Space Agency. Thank you so much. And to our very able moderator, who's given us a very powerful information part as well, Pauline Okeo, who's Senior Solutions Engineer at SB. Okay, so as we clear up the stage, we're going to go on a break for refreshments. Are you guys hungry? So we're going to go on a short tea break. So the refreshments will be served here. For the speakers, please let's meet at the tent right outside this room.
write, as you go outside, you write these attend. For the speakers,